Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. Got one returning champion and one new guest here on the show today. Jason Carter Solomon, as always, my friend. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, sir.
And this is a first for us on the podcast that we actually have a bank president joining us today. And I'm super excited for this. We have a lot of topics lined out that we want to hit, but it's not often that I get to talk to a bank president. I know, Jason, you get to talk to bank presidents a lot.
Probably much to her chagrin.
But Abby Wendell's here today from Landmark National Bank. Thanks for joining us.
You are very welcome, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm delighted you're here. And we have a lot of finance and banker stuff to talk about today, which is not my lane at all. So it's kind of cool for me. Although weirdly, it seems like I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts lately where people are talking a lot about finance. And so I have a lot of questions and my head is full of stuff like this. But anybody who's listened before knows Jason. We've been on a couple of times. Yeah. Jason is a banker. Grew up in St. Louis. He's also occasionally dabbles in doing small scale development himself.
That's right.
And we like to talk shit a little bit too, but that's okay. That's just fun. Abby, I'd love for people to know just kind of briefly, how did you? I know you've had like a varied career to this point and a lot of really interesting and diverse background. What if you could talk just for a minute or two about like what got you to this point at being the president of a Landmark Bank?
Sure. Yeah. No, again, happy to be here, Kevin, and thank you for the invitation. I always enjoy spending time with Jason. He's one of our best, and it's great to reconnect with you too. So yes, I have some diversity in my background, but it's all been within the same industry, within banking. I grew up in Cincinnati. I moved to Colorado for college, went to undergrad at the University of Colorado and graduate school there also, and started my career with the Fed, branch of the Kansas City Fed there in Denver. Spent 12 years there and then decided I needed to make a run at the private sector and worked at UMB, mid-sized regional bank here in Kansas City for 15 years. And I just had the opportunity to join Landmark, which is, I think I've always had an affinity for community banking. And it goes back to my Fed days where the Kansas City Fed occupies this unique role, working with community banks, advocating for the economies in the 10th district, which covers an 8-state region. And while I certainly enjoyed my time and have, enjoyed my career over time, there was an opportunity here to join the bank as president and CEO. And frankly, after giving it a lot of consideration, I thought this is just something I can't pass up. And, when you're thinking about your career and advancement and how you might think about the next position, I always think there's some level of, striving, right? And in this case, I took a look at the bank, I evaluated options, and when I had the chance to talk with the folks who were making the decision about the next leader, it just felt easy and natural. And my conversations were very much, well, here's what I see happening. Here's what I see going on in your communities. And here's some ideas that might be interesting. And if that's what you're looking for, fantastic. If it's not, that's okay too. I was happy doing what I was doing previously. And it was, as a result, the transition and joining the team and getting to know the 23 communities that we're in has actually been incredibly rewarding, even though it's only been a year, and a lot of fun and educational.
So if you could just give the quick commercial for your bank and how it's different from sort of other local or regional community banks. How's Landmark different?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really appreciate it because Landmark, we are in 23 communities across Kansas. We have 29 locations, and we really enjoy this interesting balance between urban communities and rural communities. Oftentimes, you'll find a community bank is domiciled in the same place with its locations as its headquarters location. And that's a little different for Landmark. Our headquarters is actually in Manhattan, Kansas, and it's grown organically, but also through acquisition over the past 20 some years. And we're also publicly traded, which is unusual as well.
I
So
didn't know that.
the company did a charter conversion back in the early 2000s and went public at the same time. So I have the interesting opportunity to both, run the bank and be a part of these communities, but also be paying attention to how investors think about banks like ours. And so with that in mind, we have fewer locations within a community. So take, for example, Dodge City, Kansas. We have 2 locations in Dodge City. Dodge City is a small town. It's a bustling town. It's fascinating. And then we have, the locations spread across the state. Kansas City, the Kansas City region, specifically Overland Park, is now our largest single concentration of our lending portfolio, and it's growing in the deposit space too. But having that balance is something that we enjoy.
Right now, I've got people listening in New York and Los Angeles, and they're like, Dodge City, Kansas is fascinating? Huh, interesting. Probably the first time they've heard that. But I've actually been out there myself. It is kind of wild.
It is wild. And I mean, their heritage is the West. I mean, it's the Santa Fe Trail, and it was the heart of expansion. You can go out there and gaze on the horizon and, kind of still see some wagon tracks. So they take that pride very seriously. I'm a big fan of the Boot Hill Museum. And also, it was for a while there the 6th largest resettlement site for Catholic Charities. So without question, it has been fueled recently by immigrant growth and the cattle industry,
Right.
meat packing. So, but we're also in other communities too. So Great Bend. Manhattan, Lawrence. So we have college towns. We also have an interesting overlap with community colleges, which really serve folks who want to stay in those communities. And they offer programs that are relevant and meaningful, and they support those communities greatly. So Barton County, Fort Scott Community College, just some interesting things going on in those places.
Yeah, so my dad was in meatpacking for a lot of years in management, and so we kind of always stayed tuned into a lot of those rural communities and things that were going on.
Yep.
We heard about it all the time growing up. Well, I really appreciate you being on here. Not many bank presidents that would want to do this, so I'm grateful for your time. I do want to spend, so obviously a big part of our the audience here are people who are what we call small developers or incremental developers, people who really care about a community that they live in. They are either doing projects or they want to figure out how to do projects. And so I want to spend, definitely some time talking about that today. I think most people who are in the small developer world understand that you're more likely to go to a community bank than a national bank, right, to get started. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the perspective of, and either one of you, about the perspective of the role of a community bank when it comes to working with kind of like local entrepreneurs and local real estate developers, especially.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm happy you asked it. One of the reasons why I still do this is not to sound too much like It's a Wonderful Life, the main character in that. Jimmy Stewart, he's going around and he's talking about, hey, your dollar goes into this property and helps this person buy a house, and everybody comes along and
chokes me up every year I watch it.
100%. That's why I still do this. I still think this is a noble profession. Yeah. We may not be the gasoline in the local economy. We're certainly the oil. And what I mean by that is we help the gears move so that there is access to capital to create the things, the jobs, the opportunities for folks to want to live in these places, right? We take chances not based on just the X's and O's. We have to, in certain times, operate in a area of gray. And I don't mean gray as if we're running afoul of rules. I mean gray as what are people's stories? What is the why? Why do they want to do something? As I've gotten along in my career, I've had to really think about that as I determine why I'm going to get up every day. And I'm a big believer in anyone I can get to listen. I say, hey, why do you want to do this? You want to be a commercial developer. You want to be a real estate investor. You want to invest in real estate. Like, well, why? What is your why? Because what you find is if you figure out what your why is first, it sets you down an intentional path and your decision-making becomes that much clearer. For us, what that means is we want to do projects with people. We have a banker at our bank, Charlie Benson, and he has a great saying. We do business with people, right? People pay us back. You can put whatever you want on a spreadsheet. Your financials can say whatever. But if you have that chutzpah or that spirit to go out and do something remarkable, or different, we want to get behind you. Whereas maybe a larger institution that plays in a capital allocator space, which is just playing the spread and the margin, may not want to venture into listening to that story. Mm-hmm. That's what makes community banks stand apart from the crowd, right? So instead of capital allocation decisions, we make decisions based around some qualitative factors that help us determine how to mitigate risk. And as long as we have someone that respects the risk, but also has the right purpose and why, it's always something we're going to try to stand behind, right? Because we care about where we live. We have to see these people when we go to school, church, restaurants, and we want to make sure we're treating people well so that they can go out and do well in our communities. So that's really, I know it sounds really soft and maybe someone was hoping for a more concise explanation with respect to some quantitative things, but that's really what it comes down to, because we can all underwrite and cut a deal and analyze things. But where we make our brand differentiation is by the people we decide to do business with and how we execute well for those within our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jason, we talk about that a lot, right? I mean, this is part of our everyday conversation that we're having within Landmark. And a couple things just to speak to that. One is we talk a lot about values alignment between our associates, value alignment with our clients. And we spend a significant amount of time talking about these communities because first and foremost, we are an employer in these communities. And Jason's point about running into people in the grocery store or on the street or doing whatever is meaningful. And the reality is in a lot of these smaller communities where you do find incremental development, as you're calling it, you don't have the same service levels from a larger financial institution because oftentimes it's harder to make the deal. Economics come together. When you think about where significant economic development is happening or fast growing cities, those are usually the places where larger financial institutions want to have their operations. Whereas for us, it's a little bit of a luxury that we can still operate in these communities. And one of the first conversations that Jason and I had after I joined Landmark was, again, talking about this balance and, who am I to judge where a person chooses to live or to run their place of business? And folks in rural communities, just like in urban communities, are just as deserving to try and have, to give access to capital and to help fulfill placemaking objectives and quality of life and so forth. And the more we can be a part of that, the healthier communities are too.
Mm-hmm. What are some examples of types of projects? I'm sure this runs again, but some of the things that you see all the time, especially in a lot of these smaller communities, what are the things that people come to you with, they say, I need help on this. I'm looking for a loan on this. Here's, the plan I'm looking at. What do you see a lot of?
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to that from Kansas City's perspective and then some of our outlying markets. In Kansas City is a unique market because it's a small town, really, a growing metro, bustling metro, and there's a lot of change happening. You do have a lot of capital flocking here. So there is a spectrum that we play within. And there are, not to say that we won't be capital allocators, we can certainly play that part for the group of folks where that is what that type of deal is. And generally, to be specific, there are things within our marketplace, given our proximity to rail, intermodal, traffic, all the highways and byways.
Mhm.
We move a lot of freight. So industrial is a big thing. And we do a lot of small box industrial where we help folks either from an investment perspective or owner user perspective find plant, property, equipment and get them going and running in business, or place investments in that, because that really is a capital allocator's play, even in the small side of it, because all you're dealing with is a box.
Yeah.
And if somebody want to rent it or not, does it have a tenant or not? Does it cash flow? Cap rate's X, the leverage is Y. And so Z hopefully equals positive cash flow. We will be very competitive in that. The other segment of the market we play in, which probably is more aligned with even some of our smaller rural towns, is you have someone that wants to create something unique out of an existing building. And we have a client, Butch Rigby. And I don't think he would mind me mentioning this, but Butch is known for creating neighborhoods, helping to revitalize neighborhoods. And he's a humble person, so he wouldn't say that it's all on his shoulders, but he will go out and take risk and figure out how to engineer his business system in order to deliver a product that is superior and higher quality than what the market is used to at an affordable price by virtue of doing things that many small incremental developers do, which is they're basically their own GC. I like to brag on Butch and say Butch is one of the most talented leasing brokers and builders that does not do third-party work. He does it with an intention to curate spaces for small business owners. He understands the capital stack. So in those types of projects, a Butch will fund the tenant improvements, and you have to have a bank that understands, hey, small mom and pop owners and users of space, they can't go and get a loan for the finishes and fixtures within the four walls. It's not great collateral from a banking perspective. Butch essentially becomes the bank, but he does it with people that he believes in and he knows a neighborhood will get behind, and he has made very calculated essentially lending decisions. You can call it a TI package, but he's helping those folks be in places that they otherwise would not be able to be in by essentially funding their build out at a high quality level. And he will tell you he has substantially higher occupancy for the product type than others. Why do I bring all of that up? Because your approach matters. The curation of that tenancy matters as far as the quality of the asset. Notice I didn't talk about what the loan spread is, what his cap rate is. Then get into that, because what matters is that you can curate a tenancy that can withstand economic pressures and has an appreciation for the design and the quality. In the smaller towns, you have folks that it's even much more simpler than that. Hey, go down to Iola, Kansas and Humboldt. Hey, we need a cafe. We need a coffee shop. Just because we're in Iola, Kansas, right? And we may not have the cosmopolitan air that maybe a Kansas City or even a Lawrence might have. But it doesn't mean that the people and residents there won't appreciate quality delivery of goods and services in a space that feels like, hey, I love being here. So as you're an architect, right? You know, beauty matters, right? Design matters. And they're doing it there. I think you had Jared Allen from Thrive Allen County on, right? And it's like, I went down there and I was just so flummoxed in a positive way and amazed at the spirit of that community. Like, those are the type of projects that we get behind and that we lend to help folks deliver quality products, goods, and services to the residents that elevate the quality of life and employ people. Yeah,
and a lot of those things that you talk about are don't show up very well on the spreadsheet, like you talked about earlier, and so they may not be, may not be the right types of projects to take to a larger bank, or a larger bank just going to scratch their head. They don't know how to deal with Butch, right?
Right.
Because Butch, has his own way of kind of figuring things out, and he a lot of it is, him figuring it out on
and
the
it's
fly.
built from 30 years of experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, there's definitely an intangible quality there. And I would say for us, as we're looking at decisions for any kind of credit, those relationships matter too. And so it takes a little bit more time, but with intentionality, like what Jason was talking about, is really sort of getting behind and understanding what is your why for getting in there and doing a project. The more you can interact with someone who has resources, is a banker, you bring them in, you show them the vision, you talk about what is the sustainable model that it looks like. That matters even to somebody like me, because then as I am looking at the spreadsheet, I'm also hearing the story behind the spreadsheet.
That's right.
And understanding, well, what is the vision here for the long term, and what is their stake in it, and what is their why for bringing it to the table. It's oftentimes not just a project, it's more of a passion play, and it's more about an investment in a community.
Yeah. So it must be an interesting time to be in banking.
Yes. I don't know why you'd say that, though.
I would say probably even the last few years, we went through this
Yes.
kind of incredible change where we had essentially a zero interest rate policy
Right.
from the Fed
Right.
for like a decade. And with
Or longer.
your experience at the Fed, to be able to sort of see this trajectory, I think is, and understand the macro impacts is interesting. And we go from that to the COVID panic, and then we have inflation and interest rates shoot way up. And now we have all the uncertainty in the markets going on with the tariff situation and all that. What do you, what's going on day to day for you all? Like, how does the macro conversation impact what you do day to day in terms of how you interact with potential borrowers?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. And I've realized now, being on this side of the table specifically and looking at, deals, loans, things that we're going to fund, projects. And we do a lot of mortgage lending. We do a lot of commercial lending. We do some construction. We do ag. And then, of course, we fund these commercial real estate development projects too. I've come to realize my outlook was really formed in almost 30 years of observing the industry by folks like Tom Honig, Esther George. And I'm really lucky to have had those kinds of people to observe at a very close range. It's definitely something that when we're looking at it, again, I go back to the story, I go back to the project specifically, but we have to walk this very balanced line. So we're not going to make, even with us, we're not making huge swings at the fence. We are not looking to completely, be the only banker who's involved with helping a community, redevelop itself. We have to be very careful, which I think kind of does show up in why it's so important to us to get to know the person behind the project and not just the project itself. You can get over your skis very quickly. And it's not my personality. I mean, I love the topics that you talk about and the projects that Jason gets involved in, probably because there's always a very thoughtful approach. I mean, we're not banking folks who are just doing it to make a buck, honestly. And I think that plays out well. The broader economy and macro issues are, it's really important to pay attention to the boots on the ground from a lot of different sources. So it's not just the developer project. It's not just the, job growth. I mean, you really have to look at, and for us, we have the benefit of being able to talk to a lot of different customers and take in different industries and take in a lot of information. And I mean, that's frankly one of the more exciting things about being in banking is you do have this seat where you are looking at the economy from, everything from a steel manufacturer to a distillery to, a project like this, and really hearing like, what are your challenges? And then factoring that into a bigger picture of, okay, well, what's the impact that's going to happen in these communities? That's just a small sliver of the kinds of things that we take into consideration, but that's the fun part, and it's the difficulty of running a bank is you have to really look at it from through these different lenses.
Yeah. Especially now with you being publicly traded too. That's another
angle.
Another input that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because when I used to work as an architect, we used to kind of always think of like architects were a little bit of like the canary in the coal mine for the broader economy.
Sure. What are people coming to you with ideas?
Because they're not hiring you unless they're intending to actually do something.
Right.
And then when the phone stops ringing and you're not getting hired, you're like, something's going on.
Yeah.
I'm always
Something's
wondering,
happening in the market.
is the architect the canary or is it the coal miner?
Yeah, no doubt.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, we're always like the first to lay off and then like the first to hire. It seems like when things were picking up. But,
Oh, sure.
that profession is very cyclical. That was actually always one of the interesting challenges of running an architecture firm is that it's so tied to construction and real estate generally. And you've got to pick your niches really carefully because your business can cycle up and down pretty hard.
I think that's an important thing to kind of stop on, because as you think about like how a small scale incremental developer goes to market,
Mhm.
you don't do it by yourself. You do it with a team of folks, right? And sometimes I think, and especially in our industry, we can be heavily commoditized, right? And I think construction companies kind of belabor this point, and architects certainly can be victims of this because the margins, especially as when we talk about monetary policy, right? When money's cheap, everybody's smart.
Mhm.
Now that money is more normalized, you have thinner margins and thinner, and we have built ourselves into this weird place where there's a shortage of housing. There's a shortage of certain types and nuances of space. So you have to be much more precise as you go to market as a developer or owner of real estate. But when you're thinking about it, I had to learn this from doing some projects on my own. You really have to have a consultative approach. So when you think about architects, architects get burned a lot. And we have a lot of architects as clients because they do a lot of work for free.
No doubt.
Construction companies.
Yeah.
People don't realize do a
Yeah.
lot of work for free. And I'm not going to
Sure.
necessarily throw us as a victim in all of this, but I mean, we do quite a bit of legwork to help figure out how to do these projects. And it's hard sometimes for us to communicate our value. I'm sure it's hard sometimes for contractors and architects. This is why I think design build is probably one of the best delivery systems, but in the small incremental space, it's hard to afford that.
Yeah.
Because as you iterate through and try to figure these things out, folks are spending a lot of energy and not getting compensated for it. So I think one of the best things you can do is form these relationships, right? Sometimes we want to understand what the market is and we throw a lot of requests for bids out there. It would behoove you to build good, strong relationships with a few and don't take a shotgun approach, but a rifled approach, because the energy someone's going to put into it is going to help you get to market that much faster, because it does take a lot of iteration. So I would tell a lot of small scale incremental developers, when you think about, okay, let's talk about, and not to, let us play the victim here as the bankers, but when you think about how we're going to go design something or how we're going to go build something, find your subs, find your general contractors and your architect that's going to be fair in pricing, but really roll back the curtain and kind of help you get to value engineering quicker, because that's going to be much more accretive to success than just throwing out requests for a proposal, right? And appreciating the skill that those folks and the talent those folks bring to the table, because it can really make or break you.
Yeah, and I think about the days I had running an architecture firm or running a practice, and of the legion of mistakes that we made. One of them is not always really understanding how to align your operations with your clients' operations, and I just mentioned this now because I think it's an opportunity for a lot of people, especially a lot of architects. Architects get paid on the front end. So one of the things that architects perpetually complain about is we create the value for a project. We get paid a fee, often a fixed fee based on percentage at the front end of that. And then you've got realtors on the back end who make a higher percentage often when they're just kind of collecting value.
Yeah.
So architects and realtors, there's an issue there. But really, I mean, when I think about it, and one of the pieces of advice that I would give, especially to younger architects, if you have the ability, is to try to align, yourself. Like if you're working with a developer, try to figure out a way that you could do your fee at risk for certain. You could put a value on it, and in exchange maybe for participating in the equity portion,
right,
down the road on the back end somehow. The challenge with that is always figuring out your cash flow.
That's right.
Because you got bills to pay and everything else, anybody does. But if you can do that, what most architects don't appreciate about developers is that as a developer, all of your cash is at risk until you can get to a construction loan.
That's right.
Everything is at risk. And there's a lot of deals that never get to a construction loan because they just don't work. For a developer, then, if you can develop a relationship with an architect, that you can kind of curate that relationship, then it's a way that I think you can both add value to each other and still benefit financially.
That's right.
So one thing, if you listen to a lot of entrepreneurs, small scale developers, the thing that everybody complains about is like lack of access to capital. I'm not the finance person, so I try to simplify these things in my own brain. And what it says to me is, what it means is, I don't have any money. How do I get money?
Well,
right?
That is a question. Yes.
Right.
That's a question.
That's
Yes.
a question.
It's like, I didn't come from money. I don't know people who have money. How do I get money?
Yeah.
And I think there's kind of a feeling, people look to like larger developers and they're like, oh my God, they have access to, all sorts of people who will spend money on their projects, which may or may not even be true. But there's sort of that idea of, how do I get to having capital to get started?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how you all approach, because you probably talk to just such an incredible range of entrepreneurs in all lines of business who are asking the same kind of question. Maybe they've got a cool business idea. Maybe they've, in order to get to a loan with you, they've got to have a certain amount of capital. How do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I hear a lot in these circles is, how do you get bank ready? And I sort of, I bristle a little bit at being bank ready because, it is very true. There is a certain level of discipline that someone has to have. And I'm not saying you have to have CPA reviewed financials or things like that, but at the end of the day, we are taking depositors' money and we're lending it out into communities with the understanding that we are going to get paid back, and that the interest rate is a function of, the economy, and it's also a function of putting that capital at risk and facilitating that and so forth. So there is truth to needing to be, ready. If there's no collateral, these are basic things, right? And maybe I take it for granted to a certain degree too. And I'm privileged and lucky to have been in positions where I can buy houses or do things, to be in the banking system. We do see a range, and we have found creative ways to work with people. And sometimes that may mean the best thing for them is to say, hey, let me get you in touch with this person who can really help you get your house in order so that in 6 months, a year, or at some future date, you can come back. And by the way, keep that conversation going, keep the dialogue live, keep in touch with us about what you're doing. We have certainly, and I think most banks have a portion of their book of business that they've lent to projects where there's a healthy dose of skepticism about it, and it's priced in a certain way, or you kind of have a certain tolerance level of how far you're going to let it go. That's just risk appetite, right? And then you have to balance it out with those projects that you have absolute certainty that there's a track record there, and you're going to get your return, and you're going to help that developer or whatever the client situation is, achieve their objectives. And, similar to what you were saying about being selective and having a niche, if you will, and I call it a point of differentiation. That's really important for us too. And again, kind of getting in alignment with customers, developers, project leaders who share our values and are as committed to their craft as we are. That usually has a good outcome, and oftentimes we can ride out a bump or two. But if you go in eyes wide open and everybody's on the same page and has an understanding, it's not a secret. I think at the end of the day, that's what I would want, folks who are a little gun shy about talking to banks.
That's so good.
I would love for it. There's no secret, and we're not trying to hide anything.
Right. Yeah.
It's just about having an open, honest, and transparent conversation about what are the realities and what are the challenges, the things that are going to go well, and where do you see challenges? Another, as a leader or manager, I talk a lot about self-awareness and just kind of understanding and being willing to face the brutal facts, even if they are a bit challenging. The more you can stare that stuff in the face for what it is, the better off everyone is, because then where there might be problems down the road.
That's 100% correct. Because there's a couple of different nuances in what you're asking, right? It's like folks go, hey, I want to go generate wealth. I want to make money in real estate, and it's fun. I want to do it. It's sexy to be a developer, right? And as you and I know, when you actually do it, it's not that sexy. It's pretty damn stressful.
Like many things, you got to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
But what I try to tell folks, and I used to think, hey, my job, I always say I've always been kind of an altruistic banker, which has gotten me into some trouble, frankly. not bad trouble, just some pain and some stress and some heartache.
But it's
Don't-
also a strength of yours.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Abby. I think one of the things you inspired me by was when I was wrestling over a difficult deal last year. I felt so downtrodden because I felt like I let someone down, because I, maybe more than most, take this on as a personal cause or crusade, right? It's like maybe I romanticize my role maybe more than I should. And because I want to see people do well. I just care. And don't mean that to sound hokey, but I really do. I want to see people do well. I want to help protect them from mistakes when they can. Sometimes people don't want to listen, and that's okay. That's their prerogative. So when we talk about like how someone gets bank ready, I kind of think about it as, I thought it was my job as a young banker to go out and try to be the advocate for the little guy. What I've had to learn as I've grown in my career and in leadership is that there are some problems that are a little bit too big. They're a little bit too complex. That's okay. And I also tell people, just because I say no doesn't mean everyone's going to say no.
Mm.
The beautiful thing, and I think Austin talked about this in the podcast I listened to, and you and him, that people like to blame their inability to move forward and get the things that are accretive to success as they see them on capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a capitalist, to be frank. I think there's a compassion that has to come with capitalism as it's applied. I think the regulatory nature of our capitalist society is very necessary. People left to their own devices can be cruel. So I think it's healthy for us to have that regulatory aspect. That regulatory aspect does not permit us, nor does it charge us with solving the ills of inequality in our society as bankers, community bank, large bank, or otherwise. This is why I'm not a big advocate, and this is me speaking, not the bank, okay, for programs, right? I want to see more people do this. And I would tell you, if you want to do this, and if your heart's set in, you better determine what your why is, like I talked about. That's a very critical component to becoming bank ready. The next thing is build a relationship with a banker, build a relationship with a general contractor, build a relationship with all of these folks, right? To help you get your house in order, but help you understand what you're getting into. A banker you may talk to may be very negative because by nature of our industry, we're taught to be skeptical, right? We're skeptics. However, if you really want to do this, you got to have some perseverance. I can't give you that.
Right.
I always say there's three things that make a deal. There's ownership or control of the land, capital or the ability to go get the capital, and an idea. And when I was younger in my career, I would always think I could take one of those things and I could get someone to a deal, and I would beat my head up against a wall. And what I learned was, and I don't mean this to sound cold, someone really has to come with more than one of those things. They got to be able to go either get the idea and somehow figure out how to get ownership and control of the land. And maybe I can help them bridge the gap to capital. I'm happy to do that. That's the role that a community banker should play. Introductions. Now, we can't give you investment advice.
Right.
We cannot bridge that gap. That is not within our role as fiduciaries. That is not. But we're happy to make connections and inform you of things that we see so that you can make better decisions. That's really the piece of the puzzle. But you got to have the chutzpah to go out and get some of those components, because what happens is what you'll figure out is you're going to start to learn how to solve problems.
Yeah.
That's really critical.
I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that you have these like stupid like light bulb moments that happen in your life when you're trying to do things and deal with projects. I had another developer tell me, well, you actually really need to be friends with bankers and more than one. And what you really should be doing, if you want to if your goals are trying to do projects and raise capital, you take your ideas and you flesh them out and you go talk to your banker friends. And then you say, do you know somebody who you think might be interested in this project? And use, it sounds bad, like using your friends, but bankers do engage with a lot of people who have money and money to invest. Yeah. And you're probably going to be really protective of those relationships because they're important to you and the bank. But if you see something really good and something with potential, you might tell your friend, give them a call, and they still have to do all that work.
Yeah, it's
and
on them.
Make the pitch to that person, but you can be a resource to help connect people.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, the more opportunities you have to have those conversations, I mean, bankers love to give advice, and they have the opportunity to see a lot of different things, as we were talking about earlier. So if that particular banker isn't the right banker for your project, they may know somebody, because it is a fairly small circle when you start looking at who's in the business and who who wants to participate. And also, if you're having those kinds of conversations through friendships, it also helps you get ready for the questions that you will be asked. And if your project isn't defensible, or you haven't practiced answering those questions, that's not a great place to be in when you're asking for someone's money,
Right.
or a bank's money to help fund the thing.
Yeah.
So the more open-minded and kind of tolerant you can be of being challenged or ask questions, I mean, that is the role, is for us to kind of poke holes in an opportunity before we actually fund it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that should make your project stronger.
Right. I would think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think it's healthy to have some skepticism, right? That's one of the things I'm so thankful about my career is I've learned it's healthy to have that skepticism, because good ideas shine brighter through that lens of having gone through that skepticism, right? And a good idea will shine in the light of day,
Mhm.
right? When given
Yeah.
the opportunity. And I got to say it again. I mean, like, if you want to do this and you have a project you believe in, you keep iterating, right?
Mhm.
Fail fast,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Have a bias towards action, right?
Right.
So that you can figure out how to engineer it to work. I think oftentimes people try to do something that I really counsel against, but I know it's hard not to do because you're trying to make a project work, or you're trying to get the dollar signs to show for you personally and
Yeah.
make it accretive.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to start small.
Mhm. Right.
If this is your first time, don't go try to do a $10 million project.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that you'll never get there, but it's okay. Everyone wants to be a commercial real estate developer. It's okay to flip a house first.
Mhm.
Because you know what you're going to get? You're going to get some of the same iterations of knowledge you need to build that are going to be accretive to you getting to that point to go build a $10 million project, but with much less risk.
It's
Yeah.
experience. And it's
Exactly.
experience. You're asking the questions, you're going through the motions, and every opportunity can build on itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you're building a network,
Mhm.
which you're going to need to do bigger projects. You're going to need a network. So, I mean, Jason, that's kind of like this thing that you and I have been kicking around a little bit lately. Jason and I talk about different projects because we're masochists and we want to occupy every second of our spare time with more projects. And so, like, we have one we've been looking at recently that is a purchase of an old property, which would probably be a residential property, probably be a rehab plus an addition. And, by most measures, a pretty small scale project, but
Yeah.
like that's kind of how we're thinking about it. We're looking at it. We're trying to iterate different ideas, design side, pro forma side, and trying to think about how something like that might work. And to me, that feels like that's an example of exactly what you're talking about. It's a pretty small project,
Yeah.
but I mean, to a lot of people, it would be significant, but relative to what we're used to, it's still fairly small.
Yeah, because I think it's important, for me, the reason why I do this stuff, in addition to my day job and nights and weekends, I am a masochist, I guess, but it's also because my why is I have a burning question to how do you deliver quality places to people? I love doing it through
Mhm.
lending to folks who are doing it and being a catalyst and a champion in a community for folks that are going to go do it. But I've always, long story short, I grew up watching This Old House, right? It was always on,
Mhm.
and I wanted to be Bob Vila, right? I just love it,
Yeah.
because I love quality of design and quality delivery of product and making someone feel like they have a home. And so when I think about doing things, I have to be honest about my bandwidth and also my risk tolerance, right? And when you think about what's a problem that's solvable, missing middle housing is a problem that's solvable, right?
Mhm.
And it is a respectable degree of risk, but also one that is manageable. And so when you think about, okay, well, where do I get started in all of this? You got to start thinking about looking around your neighborhood and your city and going, what are some of these things that really seem to be a pain point? And just because someone's not doing it, why can't they do it? Oftentimes in small scale development, you have to solve for time, honestly, because you can't afford to go to market so quickly, ramp up all of the costs that are associated with that, go through the entitlement risk, and then not have it work, right?
Mhm.
So you need to buy time to solve for things that you can then deliver at a lower cost perspective in order to be market absorbing, right?
Yeah.
So like this little lot we're talking about is like everyone is tearing down houses and building things that are bigger in scale than what's there. What if you didn't do that?
Mhm.
Is there another delivery type that might work? That just, to me, seems like an interesting problem to think about and ponder. And also, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, I will go through the exercise in my spare time and figure out how to estimate all of the bill of materials and come up with how it's going to be delivered. Because there might be something there. And I know there's a need.
Yeah.
Maybe that it doesn't work. But I would say, like, to that point, when we're talking about folks trying, start there, keep going through those processes, because you're going to have to look, you're going to kiss a lot of frogs. Like in banking, when we're trying to look for customers, we do kiss a lot of frogs, and we're okay with that, right? But each one of those frogs is a relationship we build, right? That then they turn into a prince. They have the possibility to, right? And so when you're thinking about delivering something that the market needs, don't be afraid to put some effort and energy into the iteration and ideation of it. Have a bias towards action, but don't be afraid to go look and underwrite a lot of deals.
Yeah, and I would the cherry on the top I would add to that is we both do that while having full-time jobs, having a W-2
Exactly.
job, which at that scale of project, you've either got to be in a position where you've got income from somewhere else, or if you're trying to do that and just that, you're probably got to be willing to accept a much lower like standard of living or live off of less
It's
money.
hard to get going as a developer. And I would tell people, like, listen, don't quit your day job. Now keep the first thing first.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You need to honor the horse that brought you there.
Right.
And do your best there.
Right. Right.
But again, that's why you start small.
Exactly.
And that's going to factor into our thinking too, as we're evaluating projects, because if somebody has something stable on the side and is looking to get into this, that's going to look much more favorably, or we're going to look at that more favorably, because we know that there's something else happening. So again, though, it goes back to the person. And what is their wherewithal, and can they get it done? And what's the level of their W-2 day job and things like that. But something you said that I love is this idea about being a catalyst and being a champion in a community. And that is really important to us as an organization too. We believe that we firmly occupy some of that space, even going so far to say that that's the kind of thing that drives us, our purpose in banking too. But I'm curious for you two, I'm going to turn the question
Okay.
around.
All right, here we go.
As these developers with W-2 jobs or day jobs, how do you make sure that when you're getting going, you kind of hold your project a little lightly too, right? Because if you get so sucked into that, it does kind of become your thing versus the other thing that's keeping the wheels on the bus, right? So what do you do? How do you kind of hold that lightly, and talk maybe a little bit about your decision-making process?
Yeah, that's tough. And I don't know that there's like a perfect answer to that. I mean,
And we're both polymaths, I would say, right? It's like maybe
probably.
the more arrogant term would be Renaissance men, right?
Yeah.
That's probably too high in the league
very,
for us.
very,
right?
I don't know what to say about that.
But I think, polymath would be more, because I mean, like, I build cars in my spare time with whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I know you like to do this.
I do podcasts.
So how do you keep
You're
it
creatives.
straight? Yeah.
I watch my schedule very, very tightly, for one. And then I probably generally won't do anything without partners. That's just the reality of it. At least where I am right now. If I'm going to do stuff at a smaller scale, I know my limitations on my time. I know where those boundaries are, and I'm going to have to rely on other people to work with to get something done, or manage the scale small enough that I know that I can really work on it myself. Like I was looking at a deal last year that I was super interested in my own neighborhood, a little commercial site that I was thinking about buying. I even actually made an offer on it, and we were getting really close to an agreement on it. And then I ran the numbers again, and I looked at it in another way, and I was like, it's super tight financially. So I can probably make it happen. I can probably make the deal happen, but it's looking more and more like a whole lot of work for me, and an enormous time suck for a very, very modest amount of money. And so I had to bail. There's like, it's just not, I know myself, I know my schedule, I know what I'm capable of and not capable of doing, and it was too much. And so I had to back away from that one. And that's just that's what happens. That's the way I look at it. But.
So I'll be brutally honest and very vulnerable. I will oftentimes try to take on way more than I probably should. And because I like to do everything well, I had a moment where, and I'm also a full-time dad.
Mm-hmm.
So full-time single dad.
You both are parents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And working at the bank, there would be weekends where I'm doing project accounting just to make sure that everything's balancing. What you realize is there's a cost to everything. So it's not just the financial costs. Right. You got to think about, if your why is so strong, you better be ready for some pain.
Right.
Because what I had to realize is there is a real cost, and it won't always be dollars and cents, right? It will be relationships.
Yeah.
It will be energy. It will be, and I got to go back to the relationship thing, because I didn't think about my daughter, right? Like, my daughter is my prime objective in life right now, especially while she's young, so that she feels seen, heard, right? Loved, safe, secure. That is going to be my highest ROI and legacy.
I agree.
So I don't ever want to do something that would sacrifice that. So, there was a time when I had 2 or 3 projects kind of rumbling and going on, and working full time and trying to parent. And what I've realized is, at 43, I just no longer have the energy.
You got to take care of yourself first too. And it's what I'm hearing from both of you is you've had experiences that you've learned from.
Sure. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. And that's part of it. So if you're younger, I would just say, go for it. You should, when you're younger and if you've got energy and everything, just do it. Do as much as you can. You'll never have more energy, and you'll learn. And you'll learn what you're capable of and not capable of.
And I think we're both lucky in that our passions, right, is like, I think we are both creatives, and I kind of always think of myself that way secretly. They help. Everything is kind of complementary, right? So I'm, again, like, I know, buddy of mine, we both know, Richard Wetzel, talked about this once in Centurions, when I was in Centurions. It's like, he kind of creates his orbit around his business and his neighborhood. And so everything is reciprocal.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not a big believer, and I don't mean to sound terse about this, in work-life balance. Me personally, I think there's just so many cool things to do in life. It's like, man, you just want to live life to the fullest and give it your all, give everything you do your all. So you have to be a little bit balanced about that and calculate. And so I tend to live my life, not in a bubble, but all the things I do are complementary of each other, right? And the relationships I build are complementary of each other. And I can always say that I'm helping someone do something. I may not even be working on my own project. I might just be helping someone else by making a connection, right? That then leads to, hey, from a lending and banking perspective, they're like, hey, I'll send you someone, right? Because I know you have a passion for this that matches theirs, and you want to help them succeed. They should at least talk to you. And I built a lot of professional friendships that way that have been accretive to, frankly, the bank. And I'm happy that that is the case, because, again, I live in Brookside. A lot of my clients live around that area, and I want to see my neighborhood better. So I'm happy to have formed relationships with some folks that are doing very positive things in my neighborhood, because it makes me go, hey, my daughter's going to be able to get a part-time job at the ice cream shop one day that, Butch or somebody else has developed. Like, that's a rich life.
Yeah, it is.
Right? That's a rich life.
Yeah. And I always think work-life balance is kind of funny, because like people like us, like we're not working, our jobs are hard in a certain sense, but they're not physically hard.
Right.
You've worked construction. You know what
a
physically hard job work is.
There's no such thing as work-life balance. I mean, it's the more you can kind of align the things that you're interested in, then you're going to be happy and healthy. You have to listen to yourself. You have to watch for the signals of burnout and take steps if you're encroaching on that. But at the end of the day, all this stuff that you're talking about, the same kinds of things that I do in my professional and personal life, they all kind of have the same flavor or the same undercurrent.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
There's a bit of that is just it's a different mindset that's developed the last 10 or 20 years that I'm going to feel like the old guy in the room if I keep talking about it.
Oh, listen, well, you're probably not that far off.
I admitted my age on the mic. No one else has to.
But I think you and I are a little closer than you think.
We are.
One of the things that inspired me when Abby joined the bank, and this is why I was so excited to have this conversation, is, Abby, you were giving a town hall speech and you were talking about our disparate connections amongst markets that we're in, and going, what's the uniting factor? And you said something very straight to the point, which I loved, and I've carried it with me. It's like, people want to live in the communities in which we have many of our rural and small town locations. We want to make it easier for them to live there.
Yeah.
Right. That is a cause we can get behind. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that unfolding, or what passions might drive some of that, and things you've seen in some of the communities you've visited in these smaller towns? I know I talked about Iola. I don't know if you've been to Humboldt. I mean, those things it's crazy. It's really neat.
Iola, yes. Humboldt, no. But I have listened to that episode of the podcast when you're talking about that. And I think for me, it's sort of about, this is going to sound super woo-woo, but it's like the ultimate expression of just humanity. What is the choice that you're making? And I should honor that choice. I don't have any room to judge somebody else's choice. And I firmly believe I want everybody to be happy, healthy. We're all connected at the end of the day. So if I can be a part of helping someone in whatever community they're in, and honor the choices that they're making, I mean, I derive great value from that. Again, who am I to sort of judge what people are doing or not doing? And so that's why, I mean, we do remain committed to the rural communities, because there are folks there who are there for a reason. And we want to provide services, products, solutions, guidance, whatever that may be, that is meaningful and additive to their lives. So whether you're in Iola, or whether you're in Wellsville or Overland Park, or even Kansas City, where Jason and I are almost neighbors. So we run in similar geographic circles and personal circles too. So that to me is that's the beautiful thing about being in banking, is you really have the opportunity to meet people where they are in a lot of different walks of life, and sort of, you talk about creativity, thinking creatively about, well, what could work in this situation, and just being there for folks. I mean, either a listening ear, making a referral, letting them talk about their hopes, dreams. I mean, these are actually real things,
Yeah.
So I got one last banking and development question for you. This is part of a conversation I heard on Austin Tennell's own podcast. Shout out to Austin. He's got a really good podcast called Building Culture, which is also the name of his company in Oklahoma. And he had a guest on recently, another small developer. And one of the things they were talking about was this notion they're kicking around about ways to almost like instead of like thinking about every small development as like, here's $1 million deal, here's a $2 million deal, to agglomerate a group of them into, a package somehow, and taking that to like a lender. So
That's
instead of like $1 million, you have now you have a $10 million deal that you're looking at. What do you think about? What are some of the traps that you think about, or good or bad about a concept like that, where you might have, let's say if there were a group of us that we all had deals that we were working on together, and we wanted to go together to a bank in some fashion. Does that make any sense?
Oh, I think I'd.
Oh yeah, I think it does too. I'm just going to say one thing about that, because it jumped to mind immediately. And I think about this even for our own bank too, and is scalability. So how much additional cost are you adding to a project because you're in several different locations? But that's just the first thing that instinctively came to mind. Yes. And Jason, I'll kick that to you, because I think you'd have probably some more specific questions.
There may be some challenges with that, depending upon the submarkets or disparate markets that you might be dealing with, although they're being led by different people. Yeah. The guarantee structure is going to be important.
Yeah, for sure.
I think a better idea would be to have something with a cohesive vision. I know folks are trying to be creative in that space, but I think when you have too many things with disparate, non-cohesive visions, it's harder for a bank to understand it. And one of my favorite sayings is, a confused mind says no.
Right. That's right. I mean, it's a little bit like uncertainty. If there's a lot of uncertainty, you're not going to move forward. And that's a lot of what we see in today's economic environment. But I guess some other things that I would be looking to have answered in that project is, well, which project is really paying back the loan?
That's right.
And is there some kind of subsidy going on? The guarantor structure that Jason mentioned certainly is important. But again, that's that skepticism coming through of there could be, again, here's the conservative banker coming out, but like which project is, who's the real winner here? Yes. Yep. And is there a dog here that we're trying to cover up? Those are the things I'd want to know.
We like to match repayment sources.
Yes, that's right. Sure. That's right.
That's why I go to a confused mind says no. It's another way of saying it. It's because we want to know what loan is matched with what repayment sources.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when we look at a pool of loans, so this is not something that the fact that you brought this up is not something that isn't done. It could, I don't want to say that.
I think it
is.
could be.
It
but
could
yes.
be.
Mhm.
A guy or a woman, a group of folks might come together and say, hey, we want to buy a portfolio of properties that one person owns now. That can totally happen.
Right.
It's easier because they're stabilized.
Yeah,
If
sure.
we're talking about development,
That's
that's
a different
more
thing. Yeah.
challenging,
Yeah.
right? But let's say they're stabilized. Well, generally what happens is you might bring us a pool of 10 properties, but you damn well better be sure we are going to literally loan match each repayment source. We're going to
Mhm.
size the loan based on the stream of cash flows
Mhm.
and ensure that even though it may be one blanket loan,
Mhm.
one situation, one promissory note, there's going to be multiple collateral deeds of trust or mortgages. We're going to make sure that they all match so that if something goes wrong with one,
Right.
we're going to be at a appropriately margined position on
Mhm.
that piece of collateral.
Okay.
I think the more interesting thing that I've heard some folks on your podcast talk about is this idea of equity funds.
Yeah.
Dry funds versus what we'll call wet funds, right? A dry
Right.
fund is where you go out, you raise equity in a syndication, and you're saying, I'm going to go do stuff like this.
Like the guys in Bend, Oregon, who
Yeah.
I had on.
And
Yeah.
I was surprised how successful they had said
Yeah.
that they were at it.
Right.
Normally, that's extremely tough. And we're not going to get into the SEC exemptions and things like that you have to do.
Right.
So, folks, go talk to an attorney.
Mhm.
However, the fact that they were able to do that tells me something that folks in that market are speaking a common language and they get it and they have an aligned purpose and why statement.
Yeah.
That's how they were able to do that,
Mhm.
right? Because I think Austin mentioned this. When you have the spectrum of just nonprofits that want no return,
Mhm.
I think he mentioned like $500 billion or $500 million. I can't remember the number.
Mhm.
And capital goes to nonprofits, and I'm not attacking nonprofits.
Yeah.
That's a necessary thing.
Right.
And then the other spectrum of our society that wants the highest ROI possible.
Right.
What happens is you end up with a archetype of project and architecture of projects that leaves out so much in the middle.
Mhm.
Finding the aligned purpose and why that, yeah, there has to be some sustainability by virtue of profitability, right? Like the profitability is what makes you able to go do it
Right.
again.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But finding some folks that align with why, I think folks would absolutely do that. Now, I
Mhm.
think it's challenging to do a dry fund if you cannot go build that. Now, if you take something, a
Mhm.
prototype that works, that then's been repeated, yeah, you can go raise that equity off of stuff you've already built, then recycle that equity raise. Maybe you pay down the loan on all of those things. So maybe you got it all stabilized as full as cash flowing great. It's an 80% loan to value or cost. Well, we need to go take some equity, go do another project. I think it's much healthier and easier to take a portfolio of properties, do an equity raise, and then take that equity and go do additional projects.
Mhm.
That's probably an easier path.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Well, that's really helpful. Jason and Abby, this has been a lot of
Hey,
fun.
before we
No,
get
so
out of
good.
here,
Yeah.
I have a gift for you because
Oh,
you were at my house for game night,
Yes.
and I think you brought me some whiskey.
Oh.
So I'm going to return. I'm not returning your whiskey, but I am going to give you some scotch.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen the new Harrison Ford commercials
Oh,
with
yeah.
Glimmering.
14-year-old.
You got a little Harrison Ford mystique going.
I'm trying.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
I see
watching
it.
Shrinking right now, and I mean, I guess there is a younger version of Harrison showing up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. No kidding. I enjoy watching them on 1923. You know, the Yellowstone.
Oh, I
prequel.
love Yellowstone.
Mm.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
That
that's from the bank, and we appreciate
that
it.
is a wonderful bottle
Yeah.
of scotch. I will definitely
We appreciate your
enjoy
efforts
that
in
very
Midtown.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, this
and
has
I've
been
I've
fun.
had that label before, so it's very
Nice.
good. It's
Very
very
good.
good. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Any
this-
final words from?
Oh gosh,
Abby?
I mean, I hope that the folks out there listening understand like what an inspiration you two are, and I mean, I love that you're taking this out nationwide and helping folks in communities like ours and like across Kansas think about these various things and how to do it better. So you both have given a lot of great advice. It's been an inspiration to me. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, as always, for considering to have us. And thank you, Abby, for taking time because you're very busy.
You bet.
And I was really hesitant to ask because I know you have a lot on your plate. We're very inspired by Abby's leadership here at the bank. And
That's
we're
really
going to
nice,
create
Jason.
a very special, unique market presentation in our industry through Abby's leadership. And I'm honored to work for her. I'm honored to have her confidence and hopefully to keep earning it. Kevin, thank you for all you do in Midtown and helping make our city more beautiful, more livable. And I think in some regards more kind in the way we approach the scale, size of development by highlighting incremental and small scale development, because I do think community banking can play a vital role in helping respect the size and scale of our existing neighborhoods, our historic neighborhoods, and small town communities. There are multiple ways in which to go to market and deliver all the types of space people need. But this needs to be highlighted as a newer and more innovative market delivery perspective, because I do think we get that and we get really special places to live. So I'm very passionate about it, as I know you
Well
are.
said.
Yeah.
Well
So,
said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're all working towards the same problem, trying to solve the same problem from very different angles. I'm a designer by background, so I think about design a lot. But there's the lending background. There's a regulatory background. There's a planning background.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people who kind of look at the way a lot of our communities are and are thinking, there was a way we did them 100 years ago that was pretty damn good, that people seem to love.
Yes.
There's a way we've been doing them that, in the last few decades, which, there's good aspects, but there's also a lot that we don't like very much. How do we solve this riddle of figuring out how to build and rebuild places that people truly love and enjoy and want to live in? And so it's really important, like for me, to get out of my own little bubble and talk to people like in your world who I don't know about your world.
We all make each other better.
That's right.
So appreciate you both. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care.